I want to thank you for joining us today as we continue our study series. This series today is on science origins. Is it creation or evolution? And other studies we do are on the two creation accounts, Genesis and Revelation and End Times. And you can reach us anytime at our web, berniefam.com, and hopefully soon at our new site, targettruthministries.com. Our ministry delivers God's truth to jail and prison inmates. If you would like us to mail weekly studies to someone in jail or prison, please email us with their name, their ID number, and their address. Now in this segment we're going to resume our discussion about clumping, gravity, get it up here, clumping, gravity, or electromagnetic forces. And we'll resume where we started last time on this subject. Conventional science theorizes that it would take 15 billion to 200 billion years to form our solar system through a process called clumping, where matter condenses into stars. Now, considering the theory that over long periods of time, star-forming clouds of matter condensing gives us galaxies, stars, and planets, a report has been issued by the NASA's Ames Research Center by scientists Louis Amendola, Scott Stanford, Dutch scientist Zadir Tillens, and German astronomer Tom Herbst. And they posted this in the Astrophysical Journal. And in the report, the scientists have identified two types of clouds that always remain separated, one of which has billions of tons of diamond particles. The report says that revisions will be needed in current theories that hold that over long stretches of time, the star-forming clouds condense to give birth to stars. Scientist Stanford is quoted as saying, here's his quote, "It means that all of our models of galaxy formation and evolution are flawed." Now, the Hubble Space Telescope proved that the star nurseries, which are pictured in school textbooks, cannot be proven as sources for newly forming stars. Stars cannot form from the condensing gas because scientists tell us that the heat formed from any condensing action, it actually causes the gas to expand. Evidence of measuring gas clouds in space shows that expansion of the gas clouds in all cases is not contraction, it's expansion. In other words, if you have this gas cloud in space, and the fact that the heat in it generated by the gas cloud is causing the clouds to expand. Those pictures in school textbooks of star-forming nurseries with a gas cloud and supposedly the stars being formed in the nursery there, that has been proven not to be true. Those gas clouds are all expanding. None of them are contracting into stars and galaxies. Now that supermassive black holes have been identified by the Hubble program at the center of all galaxies, the formation theories of galaxies and stars are being challenged. The latest version of how galaxies and stars formed is as follows. Following the Big Bang, billions of dense black holes were created which consumed most of the matter close to them. At a certain point in time, suggested to be 13.5 billion years by scientists, stars began forming from the condensed matter still left around the black hole. These stars began circulating around the black holes, forming the galaxies that we see today. It is still conceded that all galaxies seem to have formed at the same time in cosmic history. In other words, all the galaxies seem to have formed at the same time. The difference between conventional science and the Bible is still age. Age is always the issue. Did this happen 13.5 billion years ago, as measured by time here on Earth, as we discussed previously in the last time, or did this happen around 10,000 years ago, as some astrophysicists now theorize? Additionally, a new theory of how stars form, called triggered star formation, has been put forward by Xavier Koenig of the Harvard-Smithsonian Center of Astrophysics. And this was in Science Illustrated magazine in an article. The theory is, first a massive star forms. Now you'll notice that first a massive star forms. I guess after that you can create a lot of things, but first a massive star forms, which then causes radiation to push outward and forces the outside matter to condense into newer stars. So first you have a massive star. You have to start with that. Now how they got that, we don't know. But first you have a massive star, and the radiation from that makes clumps of matter forming other stars outside of it. These newer stars, once formed, also generate radiation to push still further outward and force farther away matter to condense, forming even more stars and so on. And eventually you would get a galaxy out of that. That's the latest theory that they've come up with anyway. Gravity is not the only force in space. And electromagnetic forces in space are 10 to the 40 power of 40 times more powerful than gravity. Now if you go back and look at my slide that I've got up there, at the bottom of that slide there is 10 and there's 40 zeros along the bottom of that slide. 40 zeros. That is how strong the electromagnetic force is over the gravity force. Even using conventional theories, if one uses electromagnetic forces, notice at the bottom of the slide that's up there, there's 10 and after that are 40 zeros. Those 40 zeros represent the amount of power that electromagnetic forces have over gravity. Electromagnetic forces are that much more powerful than gravity. We'll do a little experiment to talk about that in a little while. So gravity is not the only force in space. Electromagnetic fields in space are 10 to the 40 times more powerful than gravity. Even using conventional theories, if one uses electromagnetic forces instead of gravity to formulate the development of the universe, then the universe we see today could have been originally developed in a period of hours instead of billions of years. In other words, if you're going to rely on gravity as your scientific method of explaining the clumping of stars, the clumping of galaxies, and the formation of our universe today, and ignore the fact that electromagnetic forces in space are 10 to the 40 times more powerful than gravity, if you include those electromagnetic forces, you're going to see that you can produce the universe we see today in a matter of hours and days. It doesn't need billions of years. But if you're going to stick to gravity, then you do need billions of years because gravity is a much, much, much weaker force. Let's move on to a subject now of magnetism, and this kind of explains how strong magnetism is compared to gravity. I have here a Navy spoon in front of me. And good solid metal Navy spoon. My brother was in the Navy. I was in the Air Force. We were both in Vietnam, but he worked as a cook, provided the chiefs with all their meals, and so he was this is the only thing he left the military with. Plain old metal Navy spoon. Now this is a heavy metal spoon. It's held down to this table by gravity. Now you'll note that the gravity that's holding the spoon down is the entire planet Earth. Let's think about that for a second. I'm held in this chair, the table is held here, the spoon is held down. We're all being held down from floating away by the gravitational force of the entire planet. Gravity is a very weak force, however, and electromagnetism is very strong. Now I have here a simple little magnet out of a kitchen cabinet. This is a magnet that would hold your door closed. This magnet has the ability to overcome the entire gravity of the whole planet Earth. And I can just put that magnet on the spoon, and if I balance it right anyway, it'll lift it up. I have to get the right balance. There we go. That magnet has the ability to pull that heavy metal spoon, I can't get it off, away from all the gravity of the Earth. That explains what 10 to the 40 times power really is. Gravity has a very, very weak force. So if you use electromagnetic forces and how the universe formed, you can see it could happen very fast. But science uses the gravitational forces. We're going to move on now to a subject of galaxies. How did galaxies form? This is still a mystery in science today. At the present time, there is no evidence for how galaxies and stars formed. There is no evidence. There is theory, and there is only theory. Now, Scheffler and Ellisor, in their book Physics of the Galaxy and Interstellar Matter, they report on rotational patterns of the galaxies. Galaxies with twisted arms are evidence of a young galaxy. You'll notice in that slide that we had that the galaxy has twisted arms. If a galaxy were very old, it would look more like a featureless smear of stars. In other words, instead of having separate arms coming off the galaxy, it would all be smeared together. And that's due to the fact that there are differing rotational speeds of the stars within each and every galaxy. Every galaxy is the same way. The stars on the outside move at one speed, the stars on the inside move at different speeds. So all these different speeds in time would cause these arms to smear out because all the stars are moving at different speeds. Pretty soon it would just be a solid disk of stars. You wouldn't have these individual twisted arms from the galaxy. Ironically, however, galaxies in the universe, even those supposedly extremely old, all show evidence of twisted spirals and therefore a very young age. Our own galaxy is a spiral. And if it is even 10 billion years old, as estimated by scientists, conventional scientists estimate that that's the age of our galaxy, then our galaxy should no longer be a spiral galaxy. But it is. Richard Gentz from the Max Planck Institute of Physics in Germany, in a report in Astronomy, states that while doing studies using the Keck telescope, he measured the spectrum of stars at the center of our galaxy and determined that the evidence shows our galaxy must be less than 6 million, now that's million, not billion, must be less than 6 million years old. Science tells us that stars cannot form in a galaxy core, in regions of intense magnetic fields and strong gravitational forces. And that's what's at the core of every galaxy. And yet the evidence discovered points to all these stars being very young. David Cooperage of the Cassini program at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, in an article on globular clusters, noted that these can no longer be thought of as collections of ancient stars. Globular clusters appear to us as millions of stars packed into a small angle of space. It turns out that the scientists in the current textbooks being used are all wrong, as the consensus up until now was that these clusters comprise the oldest objects in the universe. However, the Hubble telescope and others have now confirmed that these theories are flawed. These globules contain a mixture population of stars and even some planets, which means the previous theories of star formation, galaxy formation, and age are all wrong. It's interesting that we're going to move on to the creation of elements now, but it's just interesting that every time we get involved in getting the scientific evidence, the evidence that's presented in the textbooks is not what the scientists are currently finding. You have to look in the latest journals to find out what the current evidence is. The textbooks are old. And many times the textbooks continue to repeat what the traditional theories have been, even though they've been disproven. Just like the pictures in the textbooks of star nurseries forming out of those gas clouds in space. Okay, creation of the elements. Big Bang Theory suggests that all the elements we have were generated during star formation, and star death as the universe has aged. In other words, scientists believe that as stars aged and had supernovas and novas and things blew up, that in those explosive events, that the elements that we see today formed during those events. During star formation and star death. As the universe has aged, these elements have formed. However, this is a theory only. Actual scientific evidence cannot explain the existence of any elements from fusion beyond the basic element of iron. In other words, our current theories, even though there's a hypothesis that during star formations these elements have formed, there's no evidence that can support this. We can only get to iron, and beyond iron we have no way of identifying how the elements are formed. Of course, if you believe in the Bible, you know that God formed the universe, made everything at the beginning. Okay. Creation of planets. Kind of the same thing with planets. If we look at Saturn, Saturn is losing its rings. Those rings around Saturn are disappearing. Now science tells us that these rings should already be gone if the solar system is 3 billion years old. In other words, those rings are slowly diffusing into space. And if the universe, if our solar system is only 3 billion years old, which the solar system they estimate at 4.5 billion, but even if it's only 3 billion years, they estimate that all those rings should have disappeared into space by now. Because they know they can measure those rings, and they see those rings are slowly diffusing into space. So they say they would be totally gone in 3 billion years. Also, the heat generated from planets and the moon, as measured by Space Satellite Project, indicate that the solar system should be young, as the heat levels are still very high. In other words, our planets all have a core, and they're all heated to a certain extent. And what scientists is finding out by measuring all the different planets is that all of our planets in the solar system still have a lot of heat in their core, meaning they're not very old. If they were very old, the heat would have diffused away already. Dr. Jason Lyle, PhD in astrophysics at the University of Colorado, states that the NASA satellites have measured the temperature being emitted from Jupiter and Neptune and determined they're still very hot. So in other words, the space satellites are measuring this for us right now. These satellites of Neptune and Pluto are still too hot to be billions of years old, as theorized by conventional science. So time and time again, the evidence coming back does not support what is written in our textbooks for high school and college. The planets seem to be young by evidence, not old. How about the Earth-Moon system itself? The Earth-Moon system itself. The Earth is slowing down every single year. Scientists know the Earth rotated much faster in the past. And if the solar system is millions of years old, not even 1 billion, just millions of years old, then the wind speeds would have been in excess of 5,000 miles an hour, which would have caused any water on the surface to escape. Whereas if the planet is only tens of thousands of years old, the rotational speeds would not be a factor. I don't know if you can get this picture or not, but the Earth is spinning around, and it's slowing down every day. Now, if you go backwards in that, that means that in the past it was rotating even faster. And scientists know that if it was even just a million years old, the rotational speeds would be too fast for water to remain on the planet. Lord Kelvin calculated the rate of decay of the Earth's rotation and determined the age of the Earth to be very young. Dr. Louis Schlichter, professor of geophysics at Massachusetts Institute of Technology, he acknowledged that the time scale of the Earth-Moon system presents a major problem to the acceptance of a theory of even 1 billion years, much less 4.5 for the Earth and Moon formation. Dr. Thomas Barnes, professor of physics at the University of Texas, El Paso, has calculated the speed of recession of the Moon from the Earth using the Roche limit, which is 2.44 times the radius of the larger body. In other words, what's happening is we know scientifically that the Moon is slowly receding away from the Earth. It's a very slow process. So if we know that the Moon is slowly going away from the Earth, just like those rings in Saturn are slowly diffusing away from Saturn, we can measure backwards and determine that at a certain point the Earth and Moon were closer together. How far back in time was that? And the Roche limit says that when you get to a certain point, the smaller object will break up. In other words, when the Moon gets to a certain closeness to the Earth, the gravity forces are so strong it'll cause the planet to break up. So, it's shown that the moon would have had to have been much farther away from the Earth if the age of the solar system is even a fraction of that theorized by the scientists, the conventional scientists today. If the Earth-Moon solar system and the solar system are 4.5 billion years old, then the Earth and the Moon would have collided long ago if you back up in time. There's no way that the Earth-Moon system that we have today could have existed in the distant past. Calculations show that only 1.5 million years ago, that's not billion, just 1.5 million years ago, that the Moon would have been so close to the Earth that it would have caused the tidal waves 9 times greater than today's tidal waves. I know there was a comedian once that said that's what happened to the dinosaurs. They got mooned by the moon. Anyway, scientists using conventional theory of the Earth-Moon age of 4.5 billion years, a conventional theory today, they were disproven when the first astronauts landed on the moon. You'll recall that the National Aeronautics and Space Administration predicted there were deep layers of dust due to the fact that they believed that the moon was billions of years old, and as the moon sits up there, it's collecting dust, just as the Earth is collecting asteroids and other things. The moon would have been collecting things, and because it doesn't have as much gravitational pull, there would have been a lot of dust accumulating on the Earth over billions of years. And they thought that the dust would be so deep that the lunar module, when it landed, would sink into the dust. So to prevent that, they put dishes on the feet of the lunar module so that when it landed, it wouldn't sink too deep into the dust. However, what the astronauts discovered when they landed on the moon was very little dust accumulation, indicating a young age as predicted by scientists. Scientists have predicted several meters of dust, and what they found was just a few centimeters of dust on the planet, indicating it hadn't been in existence for very long. Let's move on to the sun. Or, excuse me, now let's move back to planet and moon rotation. Yeah, planet and moon rotation. Scientists is still struggling with the evidence of angular momentum. And this term angular momentum refers to how the planets and Earth should be spinning depending on how you theorize how the Earth-planet system was formed. This evidence does not support the theories of how the solar system was formed, according to conventional science, 4.5 billion years ago. The theory is that all the planets in the solar system should be rotating in the same way. That's a conventional theory, because they were all supposedly formed from a common source in cosmic evolution, either a major collision of stars or an explosion of a star. And science knows that if the sun is spinning this way and something collided with the sun, or two suns collided together, that all the things, the elements that would come off of them would all be spinning the same way. The planets would be spinning the same way, and any moons that came off of them would be spinning the same way as well. So that's the theory. However, because of our satellite program, we know today that 2 of the planets, Venus and Uranus, spin in the opposite direction. And also 6 moons spin in the opposite direction from what the theory predicts. And in fact, our own moon has a different element makeup than our Earth, again indicating the theory of a common source is flawed. In other words, if the planets and the moon and the Earth, if we're from some common source, then we should have relatively the same element makeup, but we don't. The Earth and the moon, even our own system of Earth-Moon, are made up of different elements. Now we'll go look at the sun. Further evidence supporting unconventional science and a young age for the solar system comes from John Eddy, Harvard Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics in Boulder, Colorado, and Aram Bozarin, a mathematician, S. Ross and Company in Boston, Massachusetts. The data they put together provided evidence of the sun's shrinkage rate of 0.1% per century. In other words, the sun is shrinking, As it continues to burn fuel, the sun is shrinking every year, getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And the shrinkage rate is 1/10 of 1% per century. Now that doesn't sound like very much, but that rules out any possibility of the Earth being very old, as theorized by conventional science. If the sun was only a few thousand years old, you could extrapolate backwards at the rate of 1/10 of 1% per century, and the sun's size a few thousand years ago wouldn't have been so large as to engulf the Earth. See, if you go backwards, if the sun is shrinking every year, if you go backwards in time, that means the sun was bigger thousands of years ago, millions of years ago, billions of years ago. It's even bigger. So, if the sun was only a few thousand years old, extrapolating backwards at the rate of 1/10 of 1% per century, the sun's size a few thousand years ago would not have been so large as to engulf the Earth. However, if the sun were as old as 700,000 years, not the 4.5 billion some theorize that the solar system age is, if the sun were only 700,000 years old, then the sun's size would have been so large that it would have consumed the Earth and several other planets as well. Processes within the sun are not known. This is something a lot of people don't realize. We have a lot of theories about how the sun works, but we don't have the evidence, the proof, to identify exactly how it works. Some scientists say that nuclear fusion is underway now within the sun, and some scientists say, no, it's only gravitational forces that are at effect. We know from gravity that as things contract, they produce heat. So some say there's a nuclear bomb going off in the middle of the sun and nuclear activity, and some say, no, it's just gravitational forces compacting so much that's creating the heat. More recently, scientists measuring the levels of lithium and beryllium discovered that the sun has almost no lithium, which would be consumed in about 7,500 years at a temperature of 3 million degrees. I know these are a lot of numbers, but you have to kind of think through this here. The sun would have no lithium if it burned at a temperature of 3 million degrees for 7,500 years. Now remember, they say that the sun is 4.5 billion years old. And then the levels of beryllium would be destroyed at temperatures above 4 million degrees. And so in other words, beryllium should disappear if the temperature of the sun is above 4 million degrees. Yet beryllium appears to be abundant. Therefore, the sun's temperature is somewhere below 4 million degrees and still quite young. If the sun were billions of years old, its temperatures would have to be at least 15 million degrees with a dense core and heavy nuclear activity. The sun would appear from all this evidence to still be very young. Now in the Bible, and you can look this up, in the Bible in Revelation 16 verses 8 and 9, and Isaiah 30 verse 26, and Malachi 4 verse 1 to 2, in those three passages, we read that the earth will end, the earth is supposedly, the world is going to end by being scorched with great fire. And then if you read three other passages, if you go over to Joel chapter 2 verse 30 and 31, Matthew 24 verse 29, and look at Isaiah chapter 13 verses 9 to 13, in those three passages you'll read that the earth will be dark and cold in the end of days. Now how can both of these scenarios be true? The answer lies in what astronomers refer to as a nova. The sun first goes extremely hot for 7 to 10 days in a nova, and then it goes dark. So we're going to resume the sun next time, and we're going to talk about the end of days and the sun going dark. I want to thank you for joining us today in this series seminar. May God bless each and every day, and until next time, please pray for our jail and prison ministry, BernieFam.com.